Good morning, everyone. We're here in the snow-covered mountains of Denver, Colorado for the regional championship here this weekend. We have got the biggest regional championship the U.S. and the world has ever seen here this weekend. A lot of players going to be battling out for $130,000, and it is way too cold out here. Can we please go inside for the shot? Good morning, everybody. I'm a much warmer Tan and Grace here inside the hall here in Denver, Colorado. Now, we're here for the regional championship here this weekend with Dreamhack, and it's brought to you by Laughing Dragon. Don't forget about our sponsor, Heavy Play, here this weekend as well. Now, there's over 1,300 players here for the event, making it the biggest regional championship in history, and they're going to be playing a ton of rounds of Modern this weekend for $130,000. Now, the top 32 that finish here this weekend are going to be qualifying for a Pro Tour, and whoever makes the finals here this weekend is going to be qualifying for the World Championships. The room is full. There's a lot of buzz going on. We've got some great casters for you here all weekend long, so make sure you don't go anywhere. We're going to have a lot of magic here on this channel right after this.
Thank you, Tannen, and welcome Magic players to the Regional Championships Denver. I am Niall Joan Rivers. I am joined by Mason Clark. Mason, how are you doing today?
I am so excited to be in the booth with you and talking about Modern. It's my favorite format. This is the biggest invite-only Magic tournament of all time. It's the first time in the North Americas we've had a huge Modern tournament since the BNR, and I can't excited.
Yeah, it is very exciting. I'm so excited to be here. We have a great host of hosts and commentators for the day today and tomorrow. We're going to take a look at them real quick. This is our lineup. We've got 3 different groups of commentary. Mason and I are going to be bringing you the first few rounds that we're going to pass it on. And we're going to take a look at the event schedule real quick. So we're going to be streaming all weekend long at twitch.tv/DreamhackMagic. We're going to be starting 10:30 a.m. tomorrow, 9 rounds today, with rounds 10 through 14 tomorrow, and then our cut to top 8. So the event structure this time around is going to be 14 rounds of Swiss, and then the top 8 tomorrow, which is a single elimination bracket with modified play draw. Now, of course, there is a prize pool at the RC, and it's pretty substantial. First place, $30,000, with second place getting $15,000, and then prize support all the way through the top 64. But that's not all that's on the line. We've got top 2 qualifying for World Championship 30. Our top 32 are going to qualify for the Pro Tour in Seattle, and top 48 are going to earn their qualification for RC Dallas. So the format of the regional championship this time around is, as you said, Modern, your favorite format. It is a 60-plus card constructed format, non-rotating, features sets from 8th edition onward. It is a 1v1 high-power format that includes deep balanced metagame. It is going to be some exciting matches today. Now, Modern has received a little bit of a change somewhat recently, that we had a couple cards banned in Fury and Up the Beanstalk. Mason, what do you think about these?
These were huge changes to the metagame, Niall. Fury was really putting a lot of restrictors on kind of the creatures that could be played in the format, and Up the Beanstalk made it really hard for decks to compete with these Evoke Elementals in these 4-color decks with just having so many resources. It's going to be so exciting to see how players respond to this shift in the metagame.
Right, and as you said earlier, this is the biggest tournament that we've had in the States since these cards were banned, and also this is the official release weekend for Murders at Karlov Manor, the new set. How are those cards changing the Modern metagame?
Yeah, so the Surveillance were huge. We're going to see it here in a lot of our decks this weekend. We've also seen Leyline of the Guild Pact really pop up. We've seen some Rhino decks adopt it. You see Domain Zoo as our 49th. Players are playing it this weekend. A lot of them are playing Leyline of the Guild Pact, and a lot of other small niche sideboard cards like Pick Your Poison are popping up as well. So this set's looking to have a pretty big impact on an Eternal format like Modern, which means it's pretty strong and pretty exciting.
Yeah, there's some really cool stuff for Modern here. And right now we're taking a look at the metagame breakdown for what was registered for this tournament. We see a lot of Rhinos, a lot of Golgari Yawgmoth, and Titan at the top, but a pretty good number of decks throughout. And very excited to see how these decks are positioned and how this tournament goes all weekend long.
Yep, it's going to be really interesting to see sort of what comes out on top at the end of this weekend. I think everyone kind of knew that our top 2 decks are going to be our top 2 decks. Some debate on kind of, maybe which one will be number 1, which will be number 2. But outside of that, I think players had a really good idea of what to expect going to this weekend, which leads to some really exciting rounds and can see some really interesting metagame calls where you can actually predict a little bit of what's going on.
Absolutely. Well, I'm very excited for us to get into these matches. I think here in just a little bit, we are going to cut to our first feature match of the day of the tournament, and that is going to be Luis Scott Vargas against Jamie Castellanos. So LSV, we've got him on a 4-color Rhino list, which we just saw Rhinos at the top, but 4 colors, a little interesting. What do you think of this, Mason?
Yeah, so this is the new breakout deck of the weekend. We don't expect anything less from LSV. 10 Pro top 8's a Hall of Famer. He's going to bring some spice. And basically, the big innovation here is that Leyline of the Guild Pack card we were talking about earlier. This turns all your land into domain, all 5 colors, and turns all your cards into each color. That means Scion of Draco gives all of its keywords to those creatures. So First Strike, Lifelink, Vigilance, Flying, all that kind of stuff happens to those creatures. And now it's really hard for your opponent to interact. And when you have just a bunch of 4/4s, it's weirdly hard to kill in Modern. So LSV is basically all in on 4/4s. And you can also discard your Leyline to some of your Evoke cards. We're seeing a subtlety in these decks, Endurance, Force of Vigor, Force of Negation. So you're going to see these players actually be able to get rid of this 5-color clunky card when it's not doing its best. And it's really exciting to see the innovation going on this weekend.
Yeah, very exciting that we get to kick things off with an innovative deck like this. Now, LSV's opponent is also on a Rhinos list, but this one is a little bit more traditional. What do you think about this almost sort of mirror match?
Yeah, this is really interesting to me because one of the problems historically about playing more colors is that you kind of, in the early game, you kind of slow down, right? Like your mana isn't as quick to develop. But in the Rhinos mirror, both players don't really do much in the first 2 turns of the game that matter. So I think that Temur Rhinos might be a little bit better against some of the more aggressively slanted decks in the format, especially, if you don't have the Scion Leyline combo that, Jamie has foregone this weekend. But he's going to, lose a little bit here because LSV is going to have a little bit more powerful cards theoretically. It's going to be really interesting because, now this deck really hit social media by storm last night. A lot of people kept it really close to the chest, weren't talking about it. And it's going to be kind of the first real litmus test of this deck on a big stage.
Yeah, and I'm very excited to see how that performs and how it passes or fails that test. And we are ready, I think, for that match. So we are going to be cutting to it right away and get into it. Here we have our 2 players, LSV and Jamie Castellanos. I couldn't be more excited to be here and be seeing what these 2 players are about to do.
Yeah, this is really, really exciting. LSV is a local to Denver. He's someone who's obviously been competing in Magic for so long, and so cool to get to see him, at this RC level, trying to get to Worlds, trying to get back to the Pro Tour.
Yeah, and it looks like we have some opening hands from our players. I'm not sure if they have decided on mulligans or not yet, but seeing a lot of very powerful cards in LSV's hand as he's flipping through there.
Yeah, notice LSV had a Gemstone Caverns. So, yeah, okay, he actually won the dice roll. I was going to say, he's going to be the first one to play a land either way, though, thanks to that Gemstone Caverns.
Yeah, Gemstone Caverns very powerful, especially on the draw. It looks like he's just going to play his fetch land and pass, and Jamie is going to play his fetch land and go ahead and crack it immediately. And it looks like now LSV is cracking as well. We've got a Triumph for LSV and a Breeding Pool for Jamie.
Yep, and it looks like these players are shortcutting a little bit. Jamie is suspending a Crashing Footfalls here. And this is open deck list. Both players know exactly what they're playing against.
Right. So we've got the Crashing Footfalls for Jamie. Back to LSV. He is going to draw for turn. Shock in a Steam Vents, taking him down to 17 as well. And he's going to play a Scion on turn 2.
Yeah, this is what we talked about, right? Is this Temur Rhinos deck doesn't do as much in the early game, has a little bit better mana, but lacks a little in power. LSV, his mana is a little worse, quote unquote, but gets to do stuff like this on turn 2 and immediately start putting the pressure on Jamie.
Right, and Jamie going to suspend another Crashing Footfalls on turn 2 I mean, the clock is still ticking on those. LSV going to play his Gemstone Caverns for turn, and he's going to go ahead and play a Shardless Agent and get his Rhinos out right now. I mean, what an explosive start for LSV.
Yeah, this is, look at that too, LSV helping him out so we can play quickly. LSV loves to go fast. But yeah, this is really good. And this is sort of the upside you get for playing all those extra colors. Sometimes, you just get these extra 4/4s, and Rhinos is fundamentally a tempo deck. It's trying to get on board early and kill the opponent before they can use their cards. So, even one turn sooner of having this big 4/4, even if it never gives any relevant keywords, is still super huge.
All right, and blink if you miss it. Jamie going to play a Shardless Agent of his own on his turn, get 2 Rhinos out back to LSV. He's going to go ahead and swing all. And we're going to trade the Shardless Agents, one of the Rhinos, and tried to block the Scion. Remembered it had flying, so we're just trading everything that's the same. Yeah. And LSV is going to flash in a Leyline Binding, get rid of one of the Rhinos. That 4 damage is going to trample over. We're going to see Jamie go down to... So we've got him at 13 right now, I think
LSV is about to cast Violent Outburst, which is going to push a little bit more damage across and really put Jamie on that back foot.
This is a strong start for LSV. Yep, just casting the Violent Outburst. It's going to go ahead and cascade... likely no more Rhinos. There they go. Which is going to give all of his creatures a little boost of damage. Even the Rhino that's trading, that's going to trample over just a little bit. So this is going to be, what, 11 points of damage?
Well, I think a little extra because Draco actually gives Shardless Agent trample as well because it is a green creature. So that's going to mean we're going to get 1 more damage as well from that Violent Outburst there. So really tight technical play there from LSV. Knew that basically he was going to trade off most of his board there, but puts Jamie down to 1. And now Jamie doesn't have fetch lands and he's staring down all these 4/4s. This is not what the Rhino deck is, built to be.
Wow. What a fast start for LSV. And that's just Jamie's going to scoop it up. And that's going to be the end of game 1. So going into game 2, Mason, I mean, what do you think the players are thinking here?
Well, if I'm Jamie, I'm thinking I'm really happy to be on the play for this game, so I can't get turn 2 Draco on the play. But both these players, the sideboarding is going to be pretty similar. They can't play a lot of the cards that hard hate each other out. Lots of players will play things like Soilless Jailer, Chalice the Void, Drannith Magistrate. These are kind of things that you don't really see from the Cascade decks because they don't work with the Cascade shtick. So both players are going to get small upgrades. Play draw matters a lot in this kind of matchup, and that's why you see Gemstone Caverns sort of be in these decks, is because lots of times if Rhino's on the play, it can do what we just saw there. So this is just sort of a matchup where Jamie needs to hope LSV doesn't have those cards that are making his deck a little bit more powerful and explosive, because we saw that Sino Draco did an extra about 9 damage between giving trample to the Shardless Agent and hitting 2 times. And if that hadn't happened, Jamie could have potentially stabilized and got to the point where those 2 footfalls are coming off. So I think Jamie's just going to do some small upgrades and hope that, on the play, he can kind of do what LSV did to the best of his abilities.
Absolutely. And we're going to see right now if Jamie is able to do that on the play, as we're going to get straight into game 2 after our exceptionally fast game 1. And it looks like our players have their cards drawn. And once again, seeing some powerful cards in LSV's decks. Those 2 or maybe 3 Violent Outbursts I saw there.
Yeah, I think LSV is just going to be crashing some footfalls this game, and that's about all he wants to do. And honestly, that's all you need to do with this deck. This is sort of the marquee best or second best deck in Modern, depending on how you kind of want to look at things, right? This and Yawgmoth are kind of vying for the throne. And this deck got the biggest upgrade recently with the Surveillance. It doesn't do much on these early turns. That's why I can also splash these 5-color lands and not lose as much equity as a normal 5-color deck will. It will still matter against the aggressive decks. If LSV was playing against Burn right now, he would not be ecstatic to have this Triome instead of maybe a Dead Gone on turn 1. But, those kind of decks aren't huge parts of the metagame right now. So LSV's really positioned himself for the winner's metagame, as we do see one of these Surveil lands from Jamie here getting the smoothest draw. And this is so powerful. Now, this deck just wants to do one thing and one thing only. Put Rhinos in play, and the Surveil lands help you find the piece that you're missing.
Yeah, absolutely. And he is going to once again suspend a Crashing Footfalls. We're going to go back over to LSV, who is playing a Surveil land of his own, going to bin a Violent Outburst, suspend his own Crashing Footfalls. little bit of a slower start, which is probably good news for Jamie.
Yeah, if you're Jamie, you're going to be so scared when LSV plays his third land next turn because, I see the Violent Outburst get built. I'm like, okay, LSV has a Cascader in hand, doesn't have a land clearly. We know LSV has that land, and so now Jamie's going to be like, uh-oh, why were we discarding the Outburst? That can't be good.
Absolutely. And Jamie, it is a little hard to tell, but that land is an island, and he is playing his own Violent Outburst and cascading presently. And there's the Crashing Footfalls, and here is LSV's Outburst in response.
I like this from LSV. He knows Jamie has cards like Tidebinder Mage that could stop the Cascade. Might as well get the 4/4s into play. Also worth noting, Jamie brought in cards like Magus of the Moon, which typically you don't really do in the Rhinos mirror, but very head up there from Jamie, realizing LSV is not playing traditional Rhinos. He's playing 5-color, and that his Magus and other Blood Moon effects could be a way to steal these games against Luis Scott Vargas.
Yeah, absolutely. And here we're going to see that Cascade go off. We're going to see LSV get his Rhinos, and we're going to go back over to Jamie, see how he wants to approach this turn.
Yeah, last game we kind of saw LSV just run over Jamie. Had a very, very powerful start. I would argue probably the second best start you could have. All he needed was Leyline of the Guild Pack for his best start. This matchup can get kind of grindy because everyone's just playing with 4/4s. And so, that means we're going to have a lot of combat interaction. And even there, right, like, does Jamie want to offer the trade or not is a pretty big question that can have lasting, ramifications. And looks like he's just going to slam a Shardless Agent and Cascade again. But, he does have the board advantage currently.
Yeah, I think he's willing to make the trade knowing he's got the Shardless Agent coming down. He's got his suspended Crashing Footfalls just a turn ahead of LSV's. And we're going to go over to LSV's turn now. He is island cycling, a Lorien Revealed, going to grab an island. And I mean, we know he's got at least one other Outburst in hand and a Shardless Agent as well. So here come more Rhinos.
Yeah, and I love this play from LSV. He saw the Magus of the Moon, and it could be very tempting to maybe hold your Lorien Revealed, right? You're like, this will draw me some cards later. I might need that. But he's like, hey, I want to make sure that if that Magus comes down, I can maybe play from underneath the Magus of the Moon. So, as he cascades forever looking for some of his footfalls here, it was a very heads-up play. One thing to note, too, Niall, is LSV, I think his entire hand minus one card is other Cascaders. Very, very good. But if Jamie has a similar draw, having the Outbursts are actually worse than the Shardless Agents because very soon they're not going to be able to hit anything.
Right, yeah, so getting that something on board is huge. So Crashing Footfalls on Jamie's side, one counter left. He's going to go to combat, and LSV is going to, looks like he's going to let 4 through so he can trade, so he can eat that Shardless Agent with one of his Rhinos.
Yeah, and we see here from Jamie, he has Subtlety, Murktide, and another Violent Outburst. Looks like he's just going to let this happen and potentially hold up something like Subtlety.
Yeah, and it looks like we are letting the damage go through, and here is a Violent Outburst from Jamie.
Yeah, it looks like maybe the players were actually just double-checking the footfalls in each graveyard. Worth noting, I believe this is Jamie's last copy of Crashing Footfalls. Now, we just saw an Endurance get flipped over. That could be a huge role player in this game. If Jamie can draw and play Endurance, I just talked about how the Cascaders turn off. They'll be back on for him, and that is the world in this matchup. We talk about how it's 4/4s battling. Now, if I have more 4/4s than you, I win the 4/4 battle. That's a free lesson on the house for the chat.
Absolutely, and that is 3 footfalls in the yard for Jamie, 1 still suspended. So he is looking for that Endurance to get him out of it. But he's got 3 4/4s on the board to LSV's 1. But of course, we know LSV has more ways to cascade in hand.
Yeah, this might be a game where LSV gets to the point of hard casting Leyline of the Guild Pact. Maybe not, in these turns, but like later on, and then his Scion will just turn into this, ultimate machine in this matchup. Actually, it looks like it is going to be this turn.
Yeah, speak of the devil, he is going to play and then suspend another footfall. So I believe that is also LSV's 4th footfalls.
Yes, I think that was his draw for turn, which is his worst possible draw. And, LSV is someone who's a veteran of the game, is used to sort of these kind of situations happening, but it is an unenviable position.
Right, so he is going to double block a Rhino, just in case, take 8 from the other Rhinos, it looks like. And I mean, Jamie's got a sizable board, gonna play the Murktide to make it even a little bit more sizable.
Yeah, this Murktide is huge. I also love it. Jamie's delving all those footfalls. We talked about how Jamie maybe has the endurance, can use it to take the lead later in the game. He knows that if he just puts this big Murktide in play, the Draco's going to have to chump block. The Draco's one of the few ways LSVs get out of it. Yeah, and Jamie's won the game. Great play there.
Yeah, and what a different kind of game than what we saw in game one. I mean, is that just a matter of LSV not getting as explosive of a start, or do you think the post-board games change significantly with these decks?
I think play draw matters a ton in the Rhinos matchup there. And, you know, to call a spade, LSV did kind of draw his fourth Crashing Footfalls. Had he been able to even just Violent Outburst and get more 4/4s in play, I think the Murktide probably would have gone the distance, but it would have been a much closer game still for LSV. So it's one of those things where I think, you know, when you get to be on the play in these games, you get to start running your opponent over with the 4/4s. And then if you can keep the 4/4s going, they're always kind of on the back foot. Now, LSV has the upside of having things like Draco, meaning he's up 4/4s. And if he can assemble the wombo combo of Guild Pact plus Draco, he's going to most likely win the game on the spot there because all of his creatures will be so much better than Jamie's creatures, despite being the same cards. But ultimately, I think this is a situation where just play draw came up a bunch here. And I'm really interested to see, will Jamie try to mulligan towards a Gemstone Cavern start, right? Because if Jamie gets Gemstone Caverns here on the draw, he might be down a card, but he'll be the first one to cascade into the Rhinos.
Right. Gemstone Cavern's so powerful at being able to sort of steal the play from the opponent like that. We may very well see him go for it and mulligan aggressively towards it, but it's definitely going to be a very interesting game 3. Looks like our players are shuffling up presently and should get started pretty soon, but definitely favoring LSV on the play, as you said, so important in this matchup.
Mm-hmm.
But they are drawing their hands now.
Yeah, and this is, you know, I think Modern actually has like a pretty good amount of like you're able to maybe break the play draw dynamic due to free spells historically. We're seeing a weird moment right now where Temur Rhinos and 4-color Rhinos in this case are kind of making it more compounded just because they don't do much, right? LSV does have the chance to play the Draco like we talked about, but it's just sort of a thing where it's like, hey, our decks aren't really modal in the way we can play the early games. We kind of just do the thing we do. So the play draw kind of comes up a lot, and so does Gemstone Caverns. It looks like Jamie doesn't have one, but does have 2 force negations.
Right, and I mean, as you were just talking about, those free spells also very good in these sorts of situations. Looks like LSV is taking a look here. I think LSV has the Gemstone Caverns, which he seems to be very good at drawing on the play.
Yeah. Well, just in case, you know, in case he accidentally says I'm on the draw, he's ready, you know?
Yeah.
That's how you become a Hall of Famer.
Exactly. 500 IQ. All right, it looks like it's just going to be fetch Triome from LSV into fetch. Looks like Jamie might be shocking here. Yep. Feeling very familiar to game 1.
Yeah, Jamie's hoping it's not like game 1, but it is the exact same plays we saw in game number 1.
Yeah, Jamie definitely hoping to not see. Yeah, and just like game 1, Jamie is going to Crashing Footfalls on turn 1. We're going to go to LSV. Looks like he is fetching. And I think we are going to see Jamie's worst nightmare, the turn 2 Scion. But he's got the subtlety this time. He's going to go back on top of LSV's deck. And we're going to go back over to Jamie.
Yeah, I really like that sort of play from Jamie. It isn't how you want to use your materials, don't get me wrong, but falling so far behind is huge. Yeah, and if, you know, LSV decides to put another Draco down on the next turn, well, that's 1/4/4 compared to the potential 2 that could be happening to him. So, and Jamie has the force negation for the footfalls.
Yeah, that is huge. So Charlotte's Agent's going to come down, get Force Negation. I mean, having all the answers here, I mean, like you were talking about with the free spells, being able to kind of, take over the play draw dynamic. We're seeing the same things from game one play out, but this time Jamie is prepared for them, has answers for them. As we're going to see his Surveil land come out.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see sort of what he's going to be looking for. But one thing to keep in mind is, while Jamie's used a lot of cards, right? Traditionally, we don't want to be down on card advantage like that. We see, and Jamie bends a Murktide, maybe a sign he gets a land. If he can put down some Rhinos this turn, he will have effectively stole the play from LSV when it came to, the first one to get 4/4s down. But it doesn't look like he has anything he wants to do right away.
Yeah, it looks like he has Shocked and simply pass the turn. And then there's going to be another Scion for LSV. Another Scion for LSV's third Scion of the game, 2 on the board.
Yeah, LSV was like, hey, I'm going to put 2 4/4s in play every turn. Sometimes it's going to be a little more awkward than others.
Right, Flame of Anor from Jamie to deal with one of the Scions, but there's still another on the board for LSV. And it's going to be another pass from Jamie. And LSV is going to say, here's a 4/4 and a 2/2, which looks like Jamie is just taking.
I really like that attack from LSV. Your Shardless Agent probably isn't going to matter a ton if it's holding back on defense, right? Like, when you're going to attack with it, eventually it will die to something. So might as well attack with it now, right? If you got the way clear in case of a Tashana's Tidebinder or something. Then if Jamie doesn't have any Rhinos, you just push 2 more damage, which puts him to 8, which means your Draco kills in 2.
Absolutely, and he is flipping through his deck now, finally getting to those Rhinos. Looks like that is going to be countered. But still, I mean, even with those countered, Luis Scott Vargas has quite the board, although now on Jamie's turn, his turn 1 Footfalls is going to finally get him some Rhinos. He is going to pass again. And here comes 4 in the air.
Yeah, Urtai Scorn there is such a great counterspell for these Rhino decks. And you got to feel a little bit for Jamie. He had to bend the Murktide to make sure he had the mana to cast his other spells. And now this 4/4 in the air might just be the end of him, as LSV does get attacked for 8.
Right, and I mean, Jamie at 4 and is going to offer the handshake to LSV. That is game. LSV is our winner with another explosive Rhinos game there. Mason, what do you think about how those Scions performed, how this kind of new iteration of the Rhinos deck did?
I mean, they were so good in that game, right? It was just a situation where having more threats meant that we were able to actually continuously present threats. And like we talked about, we need to be the one who's pressuring our opponent. So LSV having more threats instead of some cards that don't maybe line up as well in this kind of matchup really gives him the edge. And, with 21% of our field on Rhinos this weekend, it's looking to potentially be a great weekend for Luis Scott Vargas.
Yeah, and hopefully it will. Those were some amazing games of almost a Rhinos mirror. I mean, definitely a Rhinos mirror, but a strange one. Excited to see where LSV goes with that. I believe we have a interview that we are going to cut to and hear more about how he felt about the match.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome back here to the Regional Championships. We're here at the interview area brought to you by Heavy Play. I'm Tanner Grace. I'm joined by Luis Scott Vargas. Luis, you just won your first round in what was a Rhinos mirror, but your list a little bit different than the normal ones.
Yeah, so I was all set to play Temur Rhinos this weekend. I played it in my last Modern event. I had all the cards, I live about 15 minutes from here. So, and then people started talking the day before about Leyline of the Guildpact Scion of Draco. And it sounds like a meme, right? You start out with the Leyline, it makes it so your Scion just costs 2 mana and has all its abilities. So it's like 4/4 Hexproof, Flying, Lifelink, Vigilance. I mean, that's pretty good, but obviously that's kind of a joke, right? And then it started putting up results on Magic Online. Some of my friends who play a lot of Modern and teammates were like, I think this could actually be good. So I kind of just took a leap of faith. I had to register it because it was 552, registrations at 6. I'm looking at lists. I'm all right. I slammed list. My buddy Max Smith gave me a list that his friend Rohan's been playing. And then I played a league with it, and I'm like, oh, wow, this deck's awesome. So what it does is it takes the normal Rhino shell, cuts the worst 8 cards. It gets to cut. It's like Murktide Regents and the random flex slots. Plays 4 Leyline, 4 Scion. But the reason it's so sick, and 4 Leyline Binding, because at that point you can play that, is you don't need Leyline of the Guildpact to cast Scion. In fact, in the match I just played, I won largely because of Scion. I had it turn 2 on the play game 1, and I had 2 of them on turn 4 on game 3. But I just did it by fetching Endotha Triumph plus Steam Vents. You just cast it off 2 lands. I never even drew a Leyline the whole game. So then you have the fact that Leyline of the Guild Pack pitches to Force of Negation and to Subtlety. So it's like you have all these uses for mid-game Leylines too. And it actually, the theory behind the deck actually sounded really good to me. I'm like, oh, this sounds like an upgrade to a potentially broken combo, but also the cards are still useful outside of the combo. That's typically a recipe for success, and so far I think the deck's great.
Yeah, I didn't even know you had Leyline until you were milling for, Rhinos to try to find it out, and, you turned it over, and I was like, oh, this is awesome, you're playing that version of the deck. It almost feels like a legacy deck to me when I've been watching you play and everything that works out now. Obviously, you want to win here this weekend, but you got a little extra, something behind it. You're kind of defending the throne a little bit here this weekend?
Yeah, the last Grand Prix here in Denver, the last big tournament here in Denver, I actually won with the Scape Shift Field of the Dead deck, because that was in 2018.
So a little extra pressure, maybe?
Yeah, I would love to defend the hometown GP, as it were. This feels like a Grand Prix.
All right, Luis, thanks for the time, and good luck the rest of the weekend.
Thank you.
This is the Heavy Play Equip Mag system.
Back. We are going to get to our backup first round of Magic, and we have Matt Tumovich on Is It Murktide against Colin Mullen, who has a very interesting deck with this Grixis Blitz list. Mason, what can you tell us about this?
Yeah, Colin's trolling us a little bit. This is a Lutri deck, if you couldn't tell from all the one-ofs. So basically, we can only have one of every spell in our deck. Lands, we have multiple of, so that's where you're going to see 2 Water Graves, etc. But this is basically a control deck from Collins. This is a deck that he has liked playing in the past, typically in the Jeskai colors. Recently made the switch to try to have more Delve threats to be better against the Yawgmoth deck that he was expecting to be a big part of the metagame this weekend, along with the Rhinos deck. And this deck is just going to try to interact and exchange 1-for-1 a bunch of times. And sort of, the secret idea is that basically, with Lutri in your essentially opening hand as your companion, you have 8 cards. And then Lutri really makes it 9 cards Nile because it copies something. So while Collins does need to engineer the game to go kind of long, if he can successfully do that, he should be able to use something like Lutri plus Expressive Iteration to really pull so far ahead the opponent can never catch back up.
Yeah, and so many unique cards here. Such an interesting deck. I'm so excited to see how it plays against Matt Tumovich, who is again on Is It Murktide, a little bit more traditional than Grixis Lutri. What do you think?
Yeah, Is It Murktide sort of a staple of the modern metagame, really kind of the Jund of our era when it comes to decks that players play. It is just a solid deck, has a pretty reasonable win rate against everything, nothing too flashy, and if you play really well and build a really good sideboard for the weekend, you can have great results, and that's what Matt's banking on this weekend.
Yeah, and I am very excited to see these 2 players and see how these decks line up against each other. And we are going to get into that right now as we see our players getting set up. There is the Otter himself, Lutri, on the board. Collins did not forget to reveal his companion.
Yeah, super easy to do that to an open deck list. You don't have to worry about it. You just plop it on the table. You're about to see. And honestly, Collins with the psychological damage factor, you normally hand someone a piece of paper at the RC. There's like 9 cards you have to read. Collins is like, here's 55 of them. Figure it out, And
right, here's my 2-page deck list. It's stapled. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Right. It looks like Collins won the die roll here. Is going to start us off with a DRC turn 1. And we're going to go over to Matt on Murktide, who probably wouldn't hate similar cards for himself. He is going to fetch, shock a Steam Vents. And play a Ragavan as his turn 1 creature.
And that's a card Collins has a lot of spot removal in his deck, but he is going to need to answer it sooner than later. As it does look like we're going to see an upkeep Lightning Bolt.
Yeah, so he's going to bolt. He's going to get that trigger off the DRC. Then he's going to draw for turn. And get in with that Dragon Rage Chandler. And no second land for Collins.
Yeah, looks like Collins was really hoping that the Surveil plus the high amount of lands that he has in his deck would pay off for him there. Basically banking on Matt playing, his own threat on turn 1, which is pretty common in these sort of matchups for you to want to do as the Murktide player.
Right, and then an Unholy, he's going to come down on the DRC to take care of that. And Matt is going to hit his land drop, which is great news for Matt. Looks like he is heavily considering whether or not to make another player, which play is going to make a second Ragavan.
Yeah. See Matt really tanking on that there. That's because Collins has so many cards. Matt needs to think about like, okay, there's some sorcery speed removal in this deck. I maybe want to play around that, Do I want to be dashing my Ragavan, or do I want to have the mana up for later? Collins obviously has a handful of all spells. So Matt's trying to figure out, is it better to give Collins a potential chance to line up a spell, or for me to maybe run away with this game here as Collins mills 2 lands off the Thought Scour?
Ooh, that is tough. But I mean, his graveyard's getting filled up nicely. If only he could hit a second land drop, which I think maybe he has in hand.
Yeah, it looks like he picked up a Scalding Tarn for turn. Might just be figuring out if he wants to fight over this Ragavan or potentially develop some different card. I believe he has Tassiger and Gurmag Angler in his deck, so he has a couple pretty powerful 1-mana plays he could play this turn.
Yeah, he definitely has options here, and he's thinking about them very carefully. And the RC is the place to make these plays carefully. You'd never want to just give your opponent a free Ragavan turn if you can avoid it.
Yeah, looking at Collins' hands, it seems like we have a Dead Gone and then one of the Delve threats. So it's probably what's happening here is Collins is thinking, what are the odds Matt can turn on Unholy Heat next turn? He has 3 different card types already. Something like a Bobble into Unholy Heat would be disastrous for Collins compared to just, deading this Ragavan and sort of being like, okay, yeah, like let's jockey for position on board a little more. And it looks like we are going to get that Watery Grave.
Right, so may very well see the Delve creature hit the board here as he taps his land. And yes, that is going to be the Tassiger.
Yeah, I like this from Collins. If Matt had a Bauble, he probably would have used it already, right? Doesn't seem like he would need to hold it here. So really the biggest punish is something like, a Preordained into an Unholy Heat. Now, it turns out Matt did have the Bauble and was just doing a little patience with the Surveil, and it's a tough place to potentially be.
Right, and he is going to go ahead and Bobble, take a look at the top of his own deck, play his fetch land, and really have to think about it. I really love the Bobble fetch land interaction in Modern.
Yeah, it's a great way to get just a little bit extra agency in your deck. Bobble is a card you want to play for turning on Delirium and sort of moving through your deck a little bit quicker. And this just lets you kind of sculpt your draws a bit more. It looks like Matt's happy with his top card.
Yeah, he's going to go ahead and pass to Collins, draw that card off the Bobble trigger. And it looks like Collins has drawn a Shieldred, has a Spirebluff Canal,
Yeah, and if you're Collins, you've got to have a good idea that Unholy Heat is not in Matt's hand. You know, it's possible that it was on top of his deck and he drew it from the bauble, but Collins knows that, if Matt had it in hand already, he almost assuredly would have gone Unholy Heat your Tassiger and attack for 2. So Collins is pretty confident that he knows his Tassiger is going to be around for a little bit.
Right, and it looks like we're going to see a dead come down on the Ragavan, and we saw that there is a Murktide as well in Collins' hand. And that dead is going to go through on the Ragavan, and Tasker is going to get in for a little bit of damage as Matt fetches at the end of turn here.
Yeah, one of the interesting things about Collins' deck list is that, because we can only play one of everything in order to have Lutri as our companion, we have a lot of like Murktide at home or this card at home situations where that's really what Tassiger's doing, is being this cheap threat that Collins can deploy early and hold up interaction, very similar to Matt's deck. Matt just takes a more mid-rangey approach as the Isaac Murktide player, but Collins is taking a more controlling approach with his deck. And Tassiger is essentially, his version of his second Murktide.
Yeah, we are going to see, looks like EI and a Preordain in Matt's hand. He's definitely got some options here as to what he can do. Looks like a counter spell as well.
Yeah, a little bit of an unenviable position for Matt to be in, because he needs to find an answer for this Tassiger, but also, knows Collins is on all gas, so lowering the shields too much could be disastrous.
Right, and he's going to go ahead and Preordain. Saw a Ledger Shredder and something else on the top there. He's going to consider that pretty carefully.
Yeah, if you haven't watched Modern in a little while, understandable, life gets busy, but Preordain recently unbanned about 6 months ago, right before the Fury and Beanstalk ban we talked about at the top of the show. And that has been a pretty big player for these blue interactive decks, just making sure that, they never really run out of gas in the mid game and can sculpt their draw both early and late to have the right interaction at the right point.
Yeah, absolutely. And he is going to draw off the Preordain. Definitely seems like a tough position for Matt, and he is kind of shaking his head at his hand here, thinking about what to do.
I really want to highlight Collins's play on, turn 3, I believe, where we talked about how he was thinking about, do I dead gone the Ragavan? Do I play the Tassiger? What's my role? And developing that Tassiger then meant it was safe from counterspell. And while there was a chance that Unholy Heat could have snagged it, a lot of things had to go wrong for Collins to have that happen. Obviously, it hasn't. And now he is in the position where he has the board presence and is forcing Matt to find the answers for him. And while Matt does have, 3 more Unholy Heats left in deck that can kill this Tassiger, Collins gets to sort of just ride this advantage and force Matt to spend his time answering this problem.
Yeah, we're going to go back over to Matt here, who's definitely having a hard time dealing with this Tassiger problem. Has an Otawara in hand and a Ledger Shredder. Just not a lot of super clean answers here. It looks like Matt, we're getting an updated life total down to 6. It's tough. This is a tough spot to be in. He's going to go ahead and cast that EI.
Yeah, and this is one of the actual hardest parts of playing against Collins' deck. Collins' deck is all one-ofs. We talked about how it has a lot of cards that are similar to other cards. And when it comes to the threats, that is, it's kind of fine. It doesn't really matter, right? Like Murktide have flying matters in this matchup. But for the most part, it's like, oh, Collins has threats. Collins' answer spells, though, are widely different. As we see Remand in the hand for Collins, means that if he ends up remanding this expressive iteration, Matt has this EI back in his hand, normally pretty okay, but lets Collins move through his deck and really ties up Matt's mana. And if he wants to fight over this EI, he's going to have to hit the right cards off it to stabilize afterwards, because he'll be out of mana.
Yeah, this is a tough position to be in here. It's definitely got a lot to think about with that counterspell in hand.
Looks like what Matt's considering is, do I just counterspell this and hope to hit red land plus Unholy Heat to kill the Tassiger? Because if I counterspell this, I'm not going to get full value off my expressive iteration unless I do something like that.
It looks like that is what he has decided to do, going to go ahead and counter that, which will let his expressive iteration resolve. Looks like DRC Bauble. I'm not sure what its third card that he picked up was.
Another DRC.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a little tough, but at least he gets to play the bauble.
Yep.
And he is going to head and bauble Collins. Oh, it looks like Collins accidentally looked at his own top deck. We are going to get a judge over here, I think, to fix this.
Yeah, and pretty easy mistake to make, like you're trying to pick up the card, end up looking at it himself. These sort of things happen. Really not the end of the world.
Yeah. And while we're waiting on the judge, just take a quick second to say thank you to Heavy Play, who is sponsoring the coverage of this tournament. And you can use code Denver2024 to get 10% off of any of the great products that they provide. It looks like we are going to get a fix here, and the deck's going to get shuffled up, and Matt is going to get to look at the top of Colin's deck.
Yeah, Matt in a really awkward position too, because he had this Odawara and he could have played it beforehand and would have ended up be able to develop the DRC, but so normally, and he finds the Unholy Heat Nile. Normally, you want to hit the land off the EI as like a backup clause. So Matt in a really awkward spot, but has finally found the tools.
Finally found the tools, but life getting lower and lower as Tasigur is going to attack once more into Matt. And it looks like he is going to play a Surveil land and send an island to the bin. And here comes the Murktide.
This is pretty huge.
Right, because he found that Unholy Heat, but now there are two threats, both posing lethal against Matt. Another expressive iteration. I mean, is there any way out for Matt at this point?
Well, I think he's on the right path so far to maybe getting out of this. He's going to play Ledger Shredder, hoping to connive into an extra answer. Collins does have the Stern Scolding, which will counter that Ledger Shredder.
This is looking tough for Matt. He's going to go ahead and think about this decision very carefully. He's going to play the DRC, which can block the Murktide. Is going to cast Unholy Heat, Surveil off the DRC. That's going to be the end of Tasigur, and assuming that DRC lives through to the combat step, Matt will have a blocker for it, and looks like that is going to happen. Here's a bauble for Collins. Now he does get to look at the top of the deck.
One thing to keep in mind is Collins has Shieldred the Apocalypse in hand, and Matt is at 2 life. So once Collins finds that black land, he will be presenting a lethal threat there immediately with this Murktide that Matt still has to answer.
Right, and we saw Collins buy Lutri there as Matt is now playing another expressive iteration. Looks like he's looking at a Ragavan, a couple other pieces here.
Yeah, looks like cards that maybe might come up later, like Spell Pierce, just trying to figure out what exactly we want to do. Take a Lightning Bolt here to maybe hopefully in the later game get a bolt, but looks like Matt's really hoping that Collins' all one-of deck has the right one-of to get out of this Murktide answer.
Yeah, he's going to dash that Ragavan in and hit a Sylvan of the Scene Sky. I don't think that is going to do it for him, and he is going to scoop up to Collins.
Yeah, that was an exciting one, and it sort of shows what Collins is good at.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, very interesting to see that Lutri deck operate and how it's playing against the Murktide deck here. Now, Collins was on the play. How much do you think it's going to matter now that Matt has the play for game 2?
Yeah, I mean, Matt is a Ragavan deck, so being able to threaten something like a Ragavan, or even maybe get like a DRC and start dashing Ragavan, these are big things against Collins. But unlike our last game, both players have a lot of 1 mana cards in their deck and a few 0 mana cards, so they are going to be able to interact a lot more than we saw in LSV versus James. So I'm excited to see how this game 2 goes.
Yeah, me too. And we're going to get to game 2 right away, get right into the action here. and see how this goes for our players Collins and Matt. Looks like they are drawing their 7s now. We've got Ragavan, Unholy Heat, Murktide, Counterspell, Ledger Shredder. Quite a hand for Matt, whereas Collins also got his one of Ragavan.
This had it.
Looks like maybe he drew Snapcaster for turn there.
Yeah. And it looks like Collins is deciding, do I just want to have Ragavan block Ragavan?
Yeah, definitely taking his time here. Going to go ahead and play the exact same 2 cards as Matt. Spire Bluff into Ragavan. Matt is going to draw an additional Ragavan. And he's going to go ahead and Unholy Heat Collins so he can get in there, make his treasure token, exile the top of Collins' deck, which is going to be a land. Nothing to do there. But, getting to be the first one to hit with a Ragavan, that's pretty great news.
Yeah, it's really big there from Matt. And Collins, has talked about this deck a little bit and says he typically likes his Murktide matchup, which makes sense, right? The control decks are typically pretty good against Murktide, but he kind of mentioned how he just needs to make sure he kind of weathers through the early game in order to get the most out of it.
Right, and it looks like he is going to do just that with a Fatal Push on the Ragavan, but it is going to get countered. However, it looks like there's a Spell Pierce for the counter spell. So quite a big fight over the Ragavan there, but Ragavan is going to die. Of course, we know there is a second Ragavan in hand for Matt.
Yeah, and pretty heads up play there from Matt, just being like, hey, I don't really want to commit the mana on dashing this Ragavan going forward, so I'm going to counterspell this to try and have run downhill. And if Collins has one of his few one-ofs that fight over this, then so be it. And honestly, that's how a lot of these games go against like these Highlander one-of decks, is you kind of have to force them to have it because they only have so many good versions of the effects, and then they have these kind of knockoff ones that you can kind of make awkward if the game goes long, and they just don't have a ton of redundancy. So now Matt knows I don't have to worry about Spell Pierce anymore. Maybe Mystical Disputes on his radar, but it becomes a lot easier to navigate the game from this point forward.
Right, and Collins has a Thoughtseize, and I think also a Bolt in hand, so a lot of way to deal with these cards that Matt has. We're going to see what he wants to play here.
Yeah, Collins is a very methodical, very smart player, and someone who will, try to think about the next couple turns ahead in the game, which is so important. You see Matt doing a similar thing here, but when you're playing a deck like Collins, every point counts. You got to make sure to use your spells right because you only get them once.
Right, so he's going to cast his one Thoughtseize. And of course, that Ragavan is an option there. We've also got the Counter Spell and the Ledger Shredder and the Murktide, which the Murktide's going to be the one to go.
Did you like it? Matt hit the Murktide a little bit under the counter spell. He's like, oh, nothing to see. I got that Raggy Man you wanted to hit, of course, but nothing over there.
Of course. And pay no attention to the card under the other card.
Yeah.
And we're going to update our life totals here. Go over to Matt, who's going to go ahead and play that Ledger Shredder down. And that's going to get mana leaked by Collins, who just seems to have answers for everything with this deck.
Yeah. Collins' deck, we talk. Oh, there's an expressive iteration, but it is just answer spells, draw spells, and then some threats to eventually win. That's all he's got.
Yeah, and it looks like right now he's got Snapcaster Mage, Lightning Bolt, expressive iteration. So actually quite a few options here.
Yeah, this is an interesting and kind of feels like a pivotal turn to me in the game because Collins could do something like expressive iteration here to make land drops, but decides just to hold up and not even put Lutri in his hand.
Yeah, and that's gotta say a lot to Matt about what Collins is working with. It looks like Matt is going to bobble, take a look at the top of his own deck, and dash in that Ragavan. And Collins is going to respond with the Snapcaster Mage. And it looks like that is going to get countered by Matt.
I love this play from Collins. It ended up getting counterspelled, but you noticed he left with the black mana. That was so he could probably target Fatal Push and still have the Bolt in hand to fight over this Ragavan. So if Matt had something like a Lightning Bolt to clear the way of the Snapcaster. He still killed the Ragavan. And if Collins fights the fight, now the Ragavan's dead, and Collins is left with an expressive iteration. And Matt has no cards in hand.
Yeah, that is ultimately a pretty favorable outcome for Collins, who's going to go ahead to his turn. It looks like we've got the EI. Not sure what card he drew there, but looks like the expressive iteration is getting played for Collins. He's going to take a look at a few cards here. Looks like a fetch land being one of them. Not sure what else, but continues to be able to position himself very nicely in this matchup.
Yeah, and it looks like Collins has a Stern Scolding and a Ledger Shredder as the 2 cards. So I'm curious to see, well, Collins, he's kind of wanted to develop every time Matt's tapped out. And yeah, he's going for it here. Even showing him like, hey, yep, this is the one I got. Here's a Ledger Shredder.
Right. Oh, but it looks like Matt is going to play a Murktide, which is a huge get for him. Going to put a very big and scary creature on the board.
Yeah.
We'll see. It looks like 3 counters.
Yeah, and if you're Collins, that does mean you have the potential to draw your own Murktide and just make it a little bit bigger, but does have to draw that one Murktide.
Right, and that is the difficulty, the price you pay for these Lutri decks. But Ledger Shredder, no slouch either. He's going to go ahead and consider. And go ahead and put that one. Not sure. He's gonna take a second to think about it. As you said, very, very methodical, knows he's at the RC. Even round 1, these are all high stakes games.
Yeah, every match is equal. There's a lot of extra pressure in our heads on round 1 in the last round, right? But all these matches matter, and Collins knows that. Played multiple Pro Tours, played in lots of different circuits throughout the years, knows that he needs to take every round with the respect that he would give a win in, and they all matter equally.
Absolutely, and he is taking a look at his graveyard here, really thinking hard about it. It looks like he is going to bin, I believe that's a Delve creature, correct?
Yeah, that's Gurmag Angler. That's Murktide number 3 at home. And
is that an Inquisition that he's drawn?
Yeah, and he hit an Unholy Heat, though, off the thing. So I'm curious to see if Collins wants to lead on IOK or if he wants to Unholy Heat and get the Connive, because he does have, I believe, every spell beat from Matt. It's open deck list. Looks like Collins is thinking about that himself here of like, well, I can connive away this Inquisition, or I can just double check and clear the path.
Right, so he is going to play the Inquisition, take the Connive trigger, bin a land, and that is going to get rid of the counter spell from Matt's hand, which I believe is Matt's entire hand.
Yeah, and that is Delirium for Collins there. By casting that Inquisition, discarding the land and everything, we've wrapped it up. And
right,
tough
so
spot to be.
Unholy Heat, and he is going to have Ledger Shredder on board, and Matt is just going to pass.
This is a spot where the companion matters a ton. So far, Collins has just traded cards, and now Collins says, all right, I'm up a card. I've got this 3-2. Eventually, it's going to copy something. I'm going to be up another card.
All right, we're going to go back over to Matt here. A little on the back foot, but, I mean, absolutely, definitely not out of this game. Still has so many things you can draw. Looks like it's going to be an Unholy Heat for the Ledger Shredder, which is going to resolve and take care of it. And we're just going to go right back over to Collins. So there's a DRC for turn. Collins has the Lutri in hand. Looks like he's going to fetch here at the end step.
Speaking of fetch, you definitely want to check out our sponsor, Heavy Play, and fetch up some of their cool products. They are sponsoring this production of the live stream specifically so that y'all can see Magic, which is just so cool. I love watching Magic. I love commentating Magic. Thank you so much for Heavy Play for doing that. You can use code Denver2024 to get 10% off their products.
Right, and we're going to get a Surveil land from Collins, which is going to get another land in the bin. Looks like he's drawing another one for turn. And he is going to easily deal with that DRC and play a land with Lutri being all he's got left. And I think at this point, Mason, we're just waiting for someone to draw something that is able to stick around.
Yeah, there's really a lot of pressure on Collins to win, right? Because Collins is the deck that doesn't have the pressure. You know, Matt has these threats. Collins has all the answers for them. But the problem is Collins can't really, you know, close the game quickly. We saw in game number 1 how he prioritized getting that Tasker early to prevent something like this happening as he's surveilling once again.
And this is really cool. We are really seeing the new Surveil lands in action here as, you know, at this late stage of the game, Collins is able to just keep fetching them and trying to fix his draws. And it looks like he found something he wanted to draw. He kept it on top. And Matt is going to go ahead and flash a creature in.
Yeah, trying to get the Brazen Borrower on board. Looks like, yeah, Collins is doing... It's very weird with Lutri. So you have to cast your spell, hold priority, and then Lutri copy your spell in the stack. So that's what we're seeing here. 2 Thought Scours for Collins.
Right, so he's going to mill a couple cards, draw a card, and then do it again. It looks like the borrower is going to resolve, but it looks like an Orcish Bowmasters for Collins, the one of.
Why would you play more if the one is all you need?
Yeah, just Surveil twice and then Thought Scour twice and you'll draw it. And then a DRC for Matt, who's just going to pass it right on over. But Collins has really built quite the board here with just 2 lands in hand. And he's going to swing in with Lutri.
One thing we're going to see here is, you know, Collins does need to find an answer, and Matt has stuff like Expressive Iteration in order to get himself out of this, and he has a bunch of those. And EI is sort of the best card in these spots for getting out of it. And while Collins does have one, he used it already and used his Snapcaster Mage. So there's a lot of pressure on Collins to get this down, so we're seeing him have to all-out attack here.
Right, and we saw the Hearse come down for Matt. He's going to start chewing through cards in the graveyard, which, I mean, pretty quickly, this Hearse is going to be a pretty formidable creature, especially with Collins down to 5 life. And it looks like there's going to see a Bolt come down on... Not sure what's being targeted here. Collins directly? Yep. So Collins going to go down to 2 life and scoop up with nothing but lands in hand.
Yeah, it looks like Collins was just wanting to see if there was any extra Surveil information he could get from Matt to see how he was sideboarding there. But we're going to see a game number 3 from this very exciting Lutri deck.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, that was definitely a much different game than what we saw in game 1. What are your sort of initial impressions seeing this Lutri deck in action?
Yeah, my biggest takeaway is that Collins is a control deck and is trying to win the game like a traditional control deck, but has all the same problems that traditional control decks have, which is winning the game. And so Matt's deck of very efficient answers can probably keep Collins at bay as long as he doesn't let something stick early like we saw in game number 1. And let's see if Collins can repeat that, though, for game number 3 here.
Right, yeah, and we saw that throughout that whole game where Collins seemingly had an answer for everything, but you know, once it got down to it, as soon as we were able to get something on the board, that was just game over.
Yep.
So we're going to get right back into game 3 here. Players have already drawn their hands and started us off.
Yeah, I think that last game is a really good lesson for viewers at home that creatures have an incredibly low fail rate. Your creatures just attacking matters a bunch and is often, underappreciated from players. And we saw that, just from Matt, like he drew a DRC and just attacked a couple times and killed Collins.
Right. It seems right off the bat here, Matt's going to play a Preordain. No shot does Collins have the one of Spell Pierce, but there it is. No Preordain for Matt. And let's say a dash Ragavan for Collins, which is huge. Getting to draw that Ragavan 2 games in a row. Not going to hit anything off of Matt, but is going to make a treasure token, which is invaluable for a deck like Collins that has so many cheap spells of different colors.
You have to admit the psychological damage is huge for Matt there. One of Spell Pierce into the Ragavan. It's hard to recover, but Matt's no slouch. Definitely used to having to do stuff like this before. And that's part of it too. When you play these events, like sometimes it's going to feel like, it's like, oh my goodness, they had the Ragavan, but you got to buckle down and be like, look, you know what? They're going to draw the Ragavan sometimes. It's okay.
Yeah.
Not the end of the world.
Absolutely. I mean, he's in the deck to be drawn, and it looks like we're going to get a Ledger Shredder Bauble from Matt, which he is going to bin a counterspell off of that Connive trigger, which is going to grow the Ledger Shredder just a bit before we head back over to Colin's turn. I think our players are just verifying life totals here, and Matt is going to get his Bauble draw. Looks like Unholy Heat in the hand of Collins.
Interesting spot for Collins. Looks to also have something like a Molten Collapse, which he could use to clear the Ledger Shredder, but it's also one of his more important and easy to use answers against a Murktide Regent, which saw, Collins kind of, very fortunately have the answer lined up in the last game. So I'm interested to see how he wants to play this game, because this is a matchup Collins has played a ton. Plays a lot of this Lucha deck for a long time in Modern now. And, Murktide's a very popular deck. So this is definitely not his first rodeo.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he is facing something that surely you would expect he has more experience in than the other side of things, where I doubt Matt is running into a ton of these Lutri decks.
And honestly, it's one of the cooler parts of the Lutri decks is, let's say Matt has been. It's probably 10 cards different than Collins. They're just,
sure, yeah.
You can do whatever you want in those decks. So you could practice against Lutri all day, and it might just be very different.
Right, and we're going to see Collins just play out the Ragavan as a creature, not dashed. And Matt is going to play another Ledger Shredder. Question is, does he have a second spell to connive with? He does. A Ragavan of his own, building quite the board for Matt as he connives off that Ledger Shredder trigger. We see an Unholy Heat in his hand. And it looks like he is going to bin a Borrower there as Collins considers at the end step. Chooses to leave it on top, which you never want to see. I think it might have been a Fatal Push. Only got a quick glance of it.
I think it was a Fatal Push as well. And I think Collins might have a turn of push your Shredder, heat your Ragavan, hit you, maybe even Hearse at the end of it. This could be a very big turn for Collins.
Right, so we are going to see the Fatal Push come down on the Ledger Shredder, and then the Unholy Heat on the Ragavan, making sure to sequence this so that Matt doesn't get the Connive trigger, but he's going to hit an EI off the top of Matt's deck.
We did not consider the fact, Niall, that Collins is going to have multiple expressive iterations if he just hits her well with his Ragavan.
Right, Collins has 5 EIs in his deck now, with a Preordain, a DRC, and a Steam Vents off of that EI.
Yeah, EI. Oof, on that one. As Collins is...
It looks like he is going to take the DRC here. Fetch to be able to play it, maybe. Wow, what a turn for Collins. Hitting that Fatal Push, getting the EI off of Matt's deck. I mean, things were looking so good for Matt just 30 seconds ago.
Yeah, and this is what we talked about the recipe before, right? Collins needs to put pressure on his opponents. He will eventually run out of steam. He is good at generating lots of extra cards thanks to Lutri. We saw that in game number 2, but he has to figure out a way to win.
Right, and Matt says, no, your deck's supposed to only have one-ofs. You don't get my cards anymore. Here's an Unholy Heat on your Ragavan. And then he's going to play a Murktide that I think is coming in with 4 counters.
Yeah, I love this from Matt. Just get it off the board. You could be really tempted to Expressive Iteration there, which was his draw for turn. But just, you know what? Get Collins dead in 2 and force him to have one of his weird one-ofs. You got a Shield Edict or something? Sure, have it. Whatever. I'm forcing you to do it.
Right, definitely just make him have it. And I've only gotten a quick glance at Collins' hand, but I don't think he does have it. I don't think he does have a way to deal with this Murktide right now.
Yeah, and I think Collins does have Delirium as well. It's a little hard to see, but if he does, that means that DRC is also probably going to get blocked by the Murktide.
Right, so we are going to see, I think that's a Drown in the lock. Not sure what else Collins is looking at here.
Drown the Lock, Fable, and Thunderfalls, the new Surveil blue-red land for Collins. And very awkward, you know, Murktide Regent pretty good at protecting itself from Drown the Lock when it first comes down there.
Yeah, definitely getting to exile all those cards from the graveyard. And Collins is going to think very hard about this. He knows how big of a threat that Murktide is. He's going to take the Drown and Lock to hand. Looks like we're going to see the Surveil land come down. I really like the use of Surveil lands in Collins' deck specifically. When all your cards are one-ofs, you know, getting to the right one at the right time seems so critical.
Yeah. And I really love this from Collins. I think he's making sure his DRC, if it is Delirious, he's going to turn it off with his own unlicensed hearse. That way he gets to keep the DRC.
Oh, wow. Yeah, he has played a hearse, and he is... Looks like he took out a land and a Ragavan.
Super heads up play.
We're going to get another Expressive Iteration, this time from Matt, who's going to see Ragavan Island Counterspell. Looks like he is maybe wanting to take the Counterspell to hand, putting the Ragavan on bottom. And he's going to swing out with that Murktide.
I wonder if after this game, Collins is going to be like, dang, this Expressive Iteration card's pretty good. If only I could put more in my deck somehow.
If only there was a way to run more than one.
Yeah. If the technology existed, though, I'm sure Collins would do it. So
he would. I mean, we've seen him play 2 different Expressive Iterations this game.
Yeah. So I think Collins kind of has a sick turn maybe lined up. He has a Preordain, a Murktide, and a Drown in the lock.
Right, so he's going to go ahead and cast that Preordain, get the Surveil trigger off of the DRC. And it looks like he is going to put that one in the bin as a Thoughtseize. And now the Preordain is going to resolve. Now we know Matt has a Counterspell in hand. If at any point Collins goes for a spell that really impacts Matt's board.
Yeah, I think what's going to happen here is Collins is setting up like, hey, I'm going to play a big Murktide. You're going to try and fight over it. That's cool. You know, I'm going to play a Gurmag Angular afterwards. And what we're going to actually see happen is when Matt goes to counter this Murktide, it's probably going to get Drown the Lock back. And we have Unlicensed Hearse in play. So that means that our Murktide is going to get very big as the game continues, as we eat our own graveyard if we want to, meaning Collins might be able to set up a lethal attack on the next turn.
Right, and we are going to see the Murktide come down for Collins as he is looking through his graveyard choosing what to exile here. And we see Matt just kind of shaking his head a bit. Knows that this is some pretty powerful posturing from Collins. And it looks like we are going to get 5 counters on the Murktide. And the counter spell comes down immediately from Matt with the Drown on the Lock in response from Collins. If you're Matt right now, you have got to be sweating just a bit.
Yeah, looks like there's just some confirmation about the graveyard.
Yep, so we're going to go back over to Matt's turn. He's drawn for turn and he is just passing. Tough spot to be in.
I really like this from Collins. End of turn, he's not even snap using the Hershey. He's double checking. He's going to eat his own thing, so that way his Murktide Regent gets 2 more +1/+1 counters, making it really close to a lethal threat.
Yeah, we've got a huge Murktide on the side of Collins here. Wow. This is a lot for Matt to deal with. What even are his outs at this point? Getting something to maybe bounce the Murktide?
Yeah, Odawara, Brazen Borrower, those are cards we've seen from Matt in earlier games in this match. Those are probably his best outs to stopping this Murktide. He does also get sort of the upside of, he can force Collins to maybe try and grow it to be a lethal or near lethal attack and then bounce afterwards if Collins takes the bait, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we're seeing such a big Murktide from Collins here. I mean, if he swings with it, I mean, do you think Matt has to take that damage?
Yeah, it really depends on what's in Matt's hand. I can't quite tell. I know there was a Flinch Strand from before. If he has something like a Lightning Bolt or an Unholy Heat, depending on his graveyard, he might be able to block and then try and finish off the Murktide. But Unholy Heat's going to be such a hard one to do in the face of this Unlicensed Hurts.
Right, and it looks like we're going to see another Surveil land come down for Collins. He's just going to take a look here and Surveil. I think that's a Dead Gone.
Yeah, and that is a show of strength because Dead Gone would answer this Murktide, and you're seeing Collins delve up a Gromag Angler, which is going to grow the Murktide even more.
Wow. Well, this is going to force Matt's hand a bit in terms of blocking this Murktide.
Yeah. And this is a big show of confidence from Collins. He's basically saying, look, if you have a bounce spell, I'm going to lose. I won't be able to Murktide to redeploy, and you'll be able to attack me with your Murktide. But if you don't, I'm going to force you to block with that Murktide Regent, and the game is going to be over.
Yeah, I mean, this is such powerful moves from Collins here. Just such a big board, and the whole board is scary for Matt. As Matt flips through his graveyard a bit. And is going to hand it to Collins to take a look.
Collins has no cards in hand. So if we do have Brazen Borrower, we can flash in Borrower just to block this Gromag. I'm sorry, to block this Murktide, and then attack for lethal with the Murktide of our own. So Collins is kind of in a very precarious position.
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, either player could have it right now. It is quite precarious, but Collins looks like he's thinking about making this swing.
Oh, yeah, accidentally knocked over the dice. All good.
Yeah.
It's huge. We agree.
Looks like he is going to swing in with the Murktide, and it is going to get chumped for Nizzy Collins by the Lutri at end of turn. And there's the handshake from Matt. That is going to be the end of our match. Collins Mullen is our winner. Mason, that was wild.
That was a very wild match and well played from both players.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well played. So interesting to see this Lutri deck with all these one-ofs and how it operates and how Collins was able to so expertly maneuver through his deck and find the pieces he needed when he needed them.
Yeah, and it really shows that, if you know your deck really well and you play tight technical Magic, you can succeed in any format, especially here in Modern.
Right. And congratulations again to Collins Mullen. We're going to have an interview with him just in a minute. But first, we actually have a giveaway from our sponsors, Heavy Play.
Yeah, Heavy Play is a great product trying to really, we saw earlier, prevent new types of storage and sleeves for players. They are sponsoring this stream this weekend. So if you want to get $5 in store credit, type Heavy Play in the chat and someone's going to reach out to you soon. Thank you so much, Heavy Play, for sponsoring the coverage of RC Denver this weekend.
Absolutely. Now, this has been a very exciting round one, I think, Mason. I can't wait to see what we get in round two. But before we get to that, we are going to have an interview with our winner, Collins Mullen. We're going to go right over to that.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the feature match area presented to you by Heavy Play. I'm Tannen Grayson. We're here with Collins Mullen, who just got a victory here in the feature match area, as you might have just watched on the screen. Now, your deck this weekend, pretty cool. I'm going to go out on a limb and say you're the only person in the room playing this.
I would imagine. I gave everybody the opportunity. If you follow me on Twitter, at Collins Mullen, I've been tweeting about this deck all week. It's just been a blast. So, yeah. I think I'm the only one playing it today, and yeah.
All right, so everybody at home, you're playing a Lutri list, so there's a little bit of restriction here. You can only play one of any of the spells in your deck. You get lands, but only one of everything else. So you got to be careful and judicious with the cards and how you deal them out, right?
Yeah, well, every card is like it's got a role to play, and you've got enough cards in certain roles that it kind of still plays like a normal mid-range deck. You've got your removal spells, you've got your threats. Each removal spell and each threat will be different, but the game still comes together in a cohesive way, usually.
Yeah, you've been actually playing this for a little bit of time, is right? Like a few years, I think, right?
Well, yeah, a couple of years ago, I went on this like crazy 15-0, like 3 leagues in a row with a Jeskai build in Modern, and I just kind of tweeted about it, and as the record got more ridiculous, it started garnering this following, and people loved it. People love Lutri.
I was one of them, by the way.
Oh yeah, for sure. And Lutri's for the people, So I'm hoping that everybody can enjoy the show. Yeah, today I'm on a Grixis build. I think that the Jeskai build that I was playing, it's hard to be in a control role these days. You have to have some proactive stuff. And the biggest discovery for me for this deck was the Delph threats. So Murktide's busted, obviously, everybody knows. But, if people remember, we still have got Tasker, Gurmag Angler, and even further throwback, we've got Tombstalker. So I'm still running four Delph threats. They're not as good as Murktide, but they're in there.
I've got some real nostalgia hearing some of these. Any of the other cards, I know it's a deck full of one-ofs. There's a lot of individuals here. Anything really standing out for you? I mean, we saw some standouts here in this match, but anything in testing really stand out?
Yeah, the card that I've been most impressed by that I don't think that anybody else plays really is Zvylin of Sea and Sky. It's the Merfolk. It's got some Merfolk flavor text on it, but the card is actually really good. And in my trying to 1-for-1 you, keep the board clear style strategy that I'm playing, attacking and drawing a card just really snowballs. So I love this card. I think it's my pet card for the weekend. And yeah.
Well, Collins, I love your deck. This is my pet deck for the weekend. Thanks for taking time with us, and best of luck the rest of the weekend.
Yeah, cheers.